I've been participating in the Luke St. James mystery puzzle books since I was very young. If you're unfamiliar with the company, Luke St. James makes puzzle books that have everything from crosswords to Sudoku, from word searches to word problems, and everything in between. Luke St. James mystery books had everything. They had been around for over 100 years, and they are one of the earliest makers of puzzle book games that I could find. They claim to have started out as brain teasers and riddles and slowly integrated into more popular puzzle book games. My dad was always obsessed with them, spending hours scouring them, despite the fact that most of them were already completed. My grandpa, too, he was the one who gave me my very first puzzle book when I was young, and he would often look at them when I was finished and nod. "Good work, boy. My hands are too unsteady to work the pen anymore, but my mind is still sharp enough to work the answers out." Dad used to look at my answers, too. He would practically rip them out of my hand when I offered the finished books to him, and then he would go over them a page at a time like he was looking for something. I never understood. Dad scared me a little, well, a lot, and he mostly stayed in the back of the house while Mom and I stayed out of his way. Mom said that he hadn't always been like that. She said that he was a very intelligent man, was a gifted mind, and that he had been very charming when she had met him in college. He'd been a teacher at the college after graduating, teaching linguistics and ancient languages, and he had worked for the FBI to crack ciphers and codes when they needed someone knowledgeable. She said he seemed like he was happy, but there was always something on his mind. She would be eating dinner with him, laying in bed, just watching TV, and this look would pass over him like static on a TV screen. She said it was pretty unsettling, but she just assumed that it was something that happened to men who were hyper-intelligent. Then, one day, he came home with a bunch of those St. James puzzle books, right about the time you turned 2, and he never quite climbed out of them. He died last year, and it took us a while to find him. Sometimes Dad wouldn't come out of his study for days on end, and that made his comings and goings hard to track sometimes. Sometimes he wouldn't eat for days, just sitting in the back room and mumbling loud enough that you could hear him from under the door. And then I would wake up the next morning and find Mom cleaning up a bunch of pots and pans where he had woken up and cooked a king-size meal for just himself before heading back to his study. Things like this had gone on for 18 years. I was in college myself before he died, and I think if his accounts hadn't been continuing to pay the bills, Mom would have taken me and left him. So when I went to tell him that dinner was ready one night, and wasn't greeted by the loud mumblings that usually came from beneath his door, I stopped and listened. There was always some sign that Dad was in there. His shadow as he walked fitfully across the floor, the soft mumbling as he worked something out, the creak of the floorboards or his comfy chair, or something that let me know that he was in there. Today there was nothing, silence, and it struck me as wrong. I reached for the knob and remembered how much Dad hated to be disturbed before walking away instead. This repeated itself for nearly a week before I found my hands turning that knob and breaking the cardinal rule of Dad's study. I had never actually been in Dad's study in the whole time I had lived in the house. The door was always either locked or barred by the understanding of what waited for you on the other side. Mom could tell me that Dad was kind and charismatic, all she wanted, but the only Dad I had ever known was a tired, sullen, angry man. You did not go into his study unless the house was on fire. You knocked, you spoke your business, and you left. If you walked in, you got the full brunt of a screaming, spitting, angry jackal who was defending its pups from an intruder. I had only done it once or twice, and both times had been enough to make me never want to open it again. So as the door came open, and I saw him sitting there with his back to it, and his head leaned back, I thought he might be asleep. "Dad?" I asked quietly. "Dad, are you okay?" He didn't say anything. "Dad," I said again, taking a step towards him. He didn't say anything. I came up beside him, my anxiety at an all-time high, but when I saw his face, I felt my teeth come together hard. His face was frozen in a look of abject horror, his mouth hanging open in a silent scream. I backed out of the room and called for Mom. He had been dead for about a week, but none of us had known, and we could have gone right on not knowing if I hadn't broken the rules and gone to check on him. It was a small funeral. Dad didn't have any friends, and most of his colleagues at the college had stopped trying to contact him a long time ago. It was a few cousins, my mom, my grandpa, and me. Grandpa is wheelchair-bound, his arthritis so bad that it's motorized, and after the service, Mom asked if he would like to come and stay at the house instead of returning to his nursing home. It would save you a trip, and we have a room available now that Murray is gone, she finally settled on. "Sure, if I won't be in the way," he said. "I'm fairly independent, but I know I can be a little bit of a pain to have an old man hanging around." "We don't mind, do we?" she said, looking at me. "Not a bit," I said, meaning it. As much of a bear as Dad had been, Grandpa was a teddy bear. I went and visited him often, and he still checked over my puzzle books when I got done with them. We shared a love of puzzles and strange knowledge, and Grandpa had been more of a father to me than my own father had. Having Grandpa move in would be great. I had mostly been staying so Mom wouldn't be by herself, and having two people to talk to in the house would be nice. So, when I got home from the funeral, I started cleaning out the study so Grandpa could stay in it. The room wasn't large, a little bigger than a bathroom, and it smelled like a bathroom too. The place reeked of sweat and unwashed flesh, and now there was also a rotten odor that I associated with a corpse. Dad had made a regular little nest in here, pinning things to the wall and leaving notes pinned to them so that he could decipher them. The more of them I took down, the more I realized that it was pages out of the Luke St. James books. It wasn't even any particular kind. There were crosswords next to Sudoku, next to searches, next to riddles, and so on and so forth. They nearly covered all four walls, covering the windows as well, and as I took them down and put them in a garbage bag, one phrase kept jumping out at me. The Luke St. James Mystery Giveaway. Dad had written it again and again, and it seemed to be the center of this spider web that he had been papering the walls with. He'd been looking for it for a long time, it would seem, and pretty soon I stopped putting papers in the bag and started taking them back out again. The notes were pretty clear that Dad had been close to discovering whatever this giveaway was, and soon I came to a description of it amidst a myriad of notes. The Luke St. James Mystery Giveaway, a contest devised by the mysterious Luke St. James himself. Luke St. James, world traveler and man of mystery, is said to have hidden the location of a fabulous treasure in the pages of his books. He claims that the last clue would come out of book number 100,000, and then those who participated in the search would have all the clues to find the treasure. The clues are scattered throughout the other workbooks, spanning back to the start of the company and modern day. Whoever deciphers the riddle will discover the greatest treasure the world-traveling man of mystery has ever owned. I looked down at the notes, most of which came with draconian symbols and descriptions, and took them to my room to study them further. After a few hours of trying to make sense of them, I was stumped. I knew what Dad had been searching for now, and he had done a lot of work, but It seemed he had only a few of the answers he needed. I needed a different perspective on this. I needed a partner for this little endeavor. Gramps. He looked up from his chair, sitting in the living room and reading quietly. Yes? Have you ever heard of the Luke St. James mystery giveaway? He went rigid, his eyes going wide. How did you find out about that? There's no way your dad would have told you about it. He didn't, but while I was cleaning out his study, I found all these notes. Seems to be some kind of contest or something, and I think it was what he'd been looking for all this time. Grandpa leaned around the back of his chair, clearly seeing if my mother was paying attention, before wheeling closer. Let's take this conversation somewhere a little more private, kid. He followed me to Dad's study, now divested of its notes and cryptic charts, and closed the door softly behind himself. Yes, I've heard of it. It was I who told your father about it, and I wish I hadn't now. It lit a mania in him, a puzzle that no one had ever solved, and he meant that he would be the one to solve it. I ruined him, and I don't want to ruin you as well. I'd like you to let it go, please. It's not worth it. It never was. But if Dad nearly solved it, I don't believe he did. I don't think anyone has ever solved it, and they never will. Don't let it control you like it controlled him. Just get rid of his notes and pretend that you never read any of it. I gripped the bag a little tighter, not wanting to get rid of it, but as I nodded, I saw Grandpa relax a little. Good. You're doing the right thing, kid. Nothing good can come of it. Keep at your studies and make something of yourself. And let this die. I left with the bag of papers, letting Grandpa explore his new space. I stood at the crossroads in the hallway for a while, looking down at the door that would take me to the garage so I could get out the garbage cans, and then to my own room that would allow me to hang on to them. I loved the puzzles. I think I said that, and this was a puzzle beyond puzzles. I stood there, torn for quite a while, but in the end, I let my obsession get the better of me. I took the bag to my room, I hid it in my closet, and after dinner, I started working on the mystery that had killed my father. Dad's notes were pretty easy to follow, and I got the threads of it pretty quickly. Dad had been very busy over the years, and the more I read, the more I really did believe that he had been close to solving it. He had determined that whatever the answer was, it led to a series of numbers. He had a sequence from a Sudoku puzzle, words from crosswords and word searches that he had converted into more numbers, and on and on and on. Dad had found the clues to find the puzzles he needed, but he was short 2 pages and 2 numbers. These were the last 2 things I needed, and I just needed to find them to solve my dad's final puzzle. I started working on it after school. Grandpa was right. I needed to finish school and have something to fall back on. The clues were 2, and they were both cryptic. The crown of madness within the mirror, 2258, was the first one. Not something I understood, though Dad's notes thought it might have something to do with brain surgery or lasers. The second was the cage of snow holds secrets of flight, 8643. I didn't have a clue what any of that meant, but unlike Dad, I had resources that he had never used. They say you can find anything on the internet, and they weren't wrong. Reddit had a few subs about the mystery, and a few other sites had speculations, but I began to see that Dad was the farthest along. Some of them were sharing notes, most of them were working on parts of the riddle, so they could get the prize and share it, and a couple of them were asking questions I know I had the answers to. What's more, one of them knew why the answers had to be numbers. It's coordinates, he said. We just need all the numbers, and then it'll tell us exactly where the treasure is. I had to trade a little, some clues that hadn't quite made sense, but they helped me figure out the number at the end of the clues, too. They were book numbers, the sequence numbers on the puzzle books that would have the answer. Luckily, I had 8643 on my shelf. I had gotten it completely at random a few weeks ago, and it seemed almost poetic that my dad hadn't noticed and taken it from me. I started flipping through it, searching for clues, and then I came to a puzzle called Birds of a Feather, 2 of the words jumping out at me. A 4-letter word for a bird's home, which I identified as cage, and an 8-letter word for someone who travels to a warmer climate, which I had identified as snowbird, which meant between them was a single word, and it seemed to fit the pattern. Dove. According to Dad's cipher, that made the number 46. I'd done it. I'd discovered another piece, and now I was on to the next one. This one proved to be a little more difficult. I didn't have book 2258, and it proved to be something that I couldn't just buy off of Amazon like I usually did. It was rare, something from the late 80s, and it was proving hard to find. I scoured the internet, looking everywhere for a copy, and I'd even taken to going to thrift stores and secondhand shops. I asked people on the subreddit if they had copies, but so far, no one had found one that was fully intact. Dad had hundreds, maybe thousands of these puzzle books, but this one had eluded him. I started to understand my dad's frustration, wondering how he had done this for 18 years. I remembered the infrequent packages that came in, the only time I saw my dad come out in the daylight, and how happy it made him to run back to his office with them. Was that all that awaited me? Was this chase all that life held for me? Someone called my name, and I looked up to find my mom at the door to my room. When I looked up from my computer screen that I'd been working on, it was pretty clear that she'd been calling me a few times. "The moving truck has your grandpa's stuff from storage. Could you help him bring it in, please?" I nodded. I needed a break, and went to help with boxes. Grandpa had brought a few things from the nursing home, but the majority of his stuff had been in storage. He had finally gotten enough together to pay a moving company to bring it, and as I carried boxes to his new room, I saw that he had installed some bookshelves, a desk, and a thin single bed in one corner across from a TV he hung on the wall. The moving guys and I emptied the truck, not a hugely taxing operation, and as the boxes sat stacked against the study wall where my father had worked himself to death, I turned to leave my grandpa to it. "Would you mind helping me unpack a little? It's hard in my chair, and I'm sure the 2 of us could get it done in no time." I started to tell him I didn't have time, but I decided to take a longer break from the mystery of Luke St. James and his little prize. I unpacked a bunch of knickknacks, some photos of Grandpa and my dad when he was a kid, some old westerns, clothes that were still somehow on the hangers, and a box of jewelry, before I got to the box I seemed to have been looking for. I opened it, and my breath stuck in my throat as I beheld the bounty that lay before me. There were so many, all of them stacked one on top of the other, and I realized that they were mine. The one on top still had my name on it, in the unsteady writing of a 5-year-old. Grandpa had kept all of them, every single one that Dad hadn't taken, and he even had some of them that my dad had later discarded. It was a whole box of Luke St. James puzzle books, and I reckoned that he had about 100 or more of them. "You thought I just threw them out?" Grandpa said with a smile. "Nah, kid, I was always proud of your hard work. At first, I was also working on the mystery, but after a while, they just became a source of pride for me. I liked knowing that the cleverness your father and I had always prided ourselves on had carried on to you, and I still am." It was hard not to hear him say that and give up on the fruitless search, but Even as he admonished me, I was already weighing the chances of finding the one that I needed. The odds were not in my favor, but I had to try. I took them over to the bookshelf, just as I had the westerns and a few pulp novels that he had, and started shelving them. They started in the 1500 range, and that excited me a little. It meant they might hold the one I was after, and my hands were sweating as I took them out. They fluctuated, sometimes jumping by hundreds of volumes, and as I shelved them, Grandpa talked about things that had happened when I was a kid or when my dad was a kid. He became so much background noise, a drone of flies, as I watched the numbers. Grandpa had been nice enough to put them in some kind of order, and as they crept into the 2000s, I got excited all over again. When it went from 252 to 278, I felt like screaming, but a couple of volumes later I found it. Volume 2258 of the Luke St. James mystery books. I had owned it once. I could own it again. Hey, Gramps, could I borrow this one? Grandpa looked at the book questioningly, reading over the cover and getting even more confused. You finished that one when you were 9, kiddo. What do you need it for? Oh, I just want to look at it. I think I remember it, and I want to see it. I guess so, but I don't know why you would need a... Then his face darkened a little, as realization hit him. You're chasing that damn mystery, aren't you? I thought I told you to leave it alone. It consumed your father. It nearly consumed me. If you keep on like this, it'll consume you too. This is the last piece, Gramps. Once I get this, I can find it, and then it can't haunt anyone anymore. He shook his head. Take it then. Take it and go. I'd expected better of you, but I suppose you're just like your father. He let me go then, and I ran from his room with my book. I felt terrible, but I was still hungry for answers. I scrabbled through the book, looking desperately for something to do with lasers or surgery or something. The book had none of these things, no matter how many times I flipped through it. I was getting frustrated. The pages crinkled under my fingers, and when my eyes fell on something, I felt a spark of hope. It was a word search about Alice in Wonderland, and the words crown and mirror jumped out at me. Between the words on the search, all of it done in my shaky 5-year-old hand, was the word Hatter. I felt my breath catch. This was it. I did the math and came up with 71. I put it with the others I had come up with and was left with a 16-digit number if I were to put them all together. The guys on Reddit seemed to have been right. Looked like it had to be a set of coordinates. Now I just had to figure out where it went to. How hard could that be, right? I floundered with how to start using these numbers for a few days, not even sure what to do with them. I had them, but they weren't in any order. I should know. I tried plugging them in and came up with a location in the middle of the ocean. I started plugging them in randomly. There were only so many combinations, after all. Grandpa wasn't talking to me when I had reason to be around him, which was mostly just meals, and Mom seemed to have noticed. She asked if we were fighting or something, and I told her it was just a disagreement. She said that we should get over it, that we were too close to be acting like this. I agreed, but I knew that he never would. I was also extremely distracted by my search for the proper coordinates. After 2 months, I had narrowed it down to 3 locations. Most of the coordinates were either for places overseas, which I hoped was not where the treasure was located, locations in the ocean, and a handful of places here in the United States. Of those here in the States, only 3 seemed to be viable. One was on a decommissioned military base. One was in the middle of a mall in the Midwest, and one was a farm near New York. I had narrowed it down by Googling the locations, seeing if there were any relevancy to Luke St. James, and that was how I came to these three. The military base had been somewhere that he had been taken after an expedition had gone amiss and he needed emergency rescue. The mall had once been a place that had been used to print his earlier books. The farm was somewhere very personal to him and seemed to have the best claim for a place where he would bury some great treasure. The farm, as it turned out, was his childhood home. He had grown up here with an older brother and his mother, and it had been the place where he had begun devising his puzzles and the things that had made him famous. He published his first book here. Here began his company, and it seemed the right place to look for his treasure. I had a break coming up from school. Spring break was a great time to take a trip, so I packed some things and told my mom I'd be out for a few days. She told me to have fun, but the look my grandpa gave me wasn't his usual disapproving stare. He looked intrigued, as if he wondered if I had found something that had escaped my father and he. I headed out, the farm about 6 hours from here, and as I drove, I couldn't help but wonder what sort of treasure Luke St. James had buried on his family farm. I had already prepared for the inevitability that somebody had found it and just not told anyone. I would find an empty box or an empty crevice, maybe with a note left by whoever had gotten there first. And this would be just a fun story to tell sometime. Grandpa would laugh at me when I told him and say that this was just how things were. Maybe it would mend the hurt feelings between us, something I wanted very badly. It'd be nice to find something else to hyperfixate about. If it wasn't an empty box, though, it could be anything. Luke St. James had been a world traveler, and his treasure could be gold or jewels or even ancient artifacts. It would likely be taken by the New York government once they found out about it, but I was willing to take that chance. It was all about finding it for me, and I was excited to come to the end of the chase. When I came to Cabrier, I got a hotel for the night and started looking for a map of the area. Cabrier is a tiny little town with 2 stoplights and more farms than businesses, but the old guy at the library laughed as he photocopied me a map that looked older than I was. No one needs a map of this place, not for a long time. There isn't enough of this place to make a map. Someone from the Farm Council made one in the 1960s, and not much has changed since. With the map in hand, I headed to the old St. James farm, now called Reisman Place. The Reismans had a nice spread, about 300 acres they were using to graze cows and sheep on, and the old farmer was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. I saw him sigh, clearly having gone through this before, and as I raised a hand in greeting, he got straight to the point. "I assume you're here to look for that Luke St. James mystery treasure. No, I don't know where it is. No, I haven't found it. No, I don't have any of his stuff. And no, you cannot just go randomly digging around in my field." I nodded. I should have expected that. "Actually, sir, I have coordinates to the treasure. It's in the woods near the edge of your property. I just wanted to ask permission before I went out there and started looking around." I pointed, not really wanting to show him the coordinates, and he nodded. "I got one request," he said, grinning as he pointed to a little shed behind the house. "You mind if I come with you? I've been hearing about this thing for years, and I'd like to at least see it. Hell, you're the first fella who hasn't come out here and just wanted to start digging." I laughed, nodding if I asked if he had an extra shovel. I'd brought a trowel and suddenly felt kind of unprepared. A few minutes later, we were heading out and away from the farm as we headed for the woods. The biography I had listened to while I was working on the location had told me that Luke St. James had played in these woods a lot with his older brother when they were younger, and it was a place he spoke of often as a place he would always treasure. That line had always stood out to me, and it was why I had come here first. The farmer talked the whole way there, telling me about people who had come snooping here. He had tried his hand at the Luke St. James puzzle for a while, but it was a little over his head, he said. Some of them didn't even ask. They just came out here at night and started digging. He had come out one night, the moon full, and found some fella digging in his sheep field. One of them had snuck under the house, digging into the foundation as he looked for anything. He had found him a few days later when he ran out of food. He had just started on a story about the guy who tried to drive a backhoe onto his cow field when we came to the spot that the coordinates said should hold the treasure. It was a little hole in the ground, too small for a large person, but just perfect for a child. We dug around for a little bit, but it appeared that the cave wasn't something that we could just dig into. "I've got a pickaxe," Farmer Reisman said, and as he ran back to the farm, I took out my flashlight and decided to see what was in that little cave. I had already established that I couldn't climb into it and didn't really want to. There could be a deep shaft awaiting me, and having to spend some time in a dark cave with broken bones as I waited for rescue services sounded pretty terrible. I couldn't see much, the hole was oddly shaped, but I decided a picture might be just as good. I hung the phone down, snapped a photo, and then I brought it back up. I nearly dropped the phone again when I saw what was waiting for me down there. Farmer Reisman came back with his pickaxe, and I advised him to call the police. "Why? Something dangerous down there?" "Maybe, but there's definitely a child's body down there, and they probably won't appreciate us dropping rocks on it." He went and called the police, and I stayed there and tried to figure out exactly what I had stumbled across. What followed was cops, a lot of explaining, and the disclosure of some information I had been jealously guarding for a while. I told them about the giveaway, the clues, the coordinates, and how I had come to find the body. They didn't think I had anything to do with the body being down there. They made that very clear. And after the questions were answered, the detective took a baggie out of an envelope and left it on the table for me. "What is it?" I asked as he got up to leave. "That's for you, or more importantly, for whoever finds the Luke St. James Mystery Giveaway treasure. It's a photocopy. We kept the original as evidence, but I think it might shed some light on what's going on here." I picked up the bag and looked at the note, reading over the rough handwriting as the detective watched me. "To you, the winner of my giveaway, I say congratulations. I have been around the world several times, seen wonders beyond imagination, but what you have found remains my greatest treasure. Brandon St. James, my older brother, went missing when I was 12. He was 13, a year older than me, and his imagination was such that he never ceased to make our games something to look forward to. We found the cave when I was 6. It was our secret hideout, the place we hid things that mattered to us. We played there until I could no longer fit through the opening. Brandon was older, but he wasn't as big as me. He still used it to hide secrets well into his teens, and it became the place where he would hide his last secret. He left one night after a terrible fight with my parents, and what followed was a torrential rainstorm. I never saw him again, but I hoped he had gotten away. Years later, when I returned to the cave to see if I could find something I had left there, I got enough of my head in to find that it had become his final resting place. I don't know if he drowned down there or what happened to him, but he was dead. I left him there, never telling a soul about what had happened to him. You are possibly the only person who knows where he lies. I mourned my brother. His imagination made me want to make puzzles and games and riddles for imaginative children and adults. And now, he is my final riddle to you. I hope you enjoyed discovering his tomb, because by the time you find him, I too will be in the ground. Thank you for your efforts, and please, stay curious. Luke St. James, Esquire. I sat there for a long time, just looking at the note and trying to figure out what to do with all this. In the end, I took my prize and went home. I still had the picture of the skeleton and the note with his signature and decided to post it in hopes of ending the mystery. My grandpa and I had a long talk about it, and he congratulated me for solving the mystery. "You did something neither me or your father could accomplish. I'm sorry that I held it against you. Good job, boy. Good job." I don't think anybody online really believed me. I'm pretty sure that most of them are still looking for it, even though I've posted the coordinates and the final answers. Let them search if that's what they want to do. For them, the chase goes on, but for me, that's all there is. So there you are, all you who seek the treasure of Luke St. James. It died before many of you were born, in a hole in the ground. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.